Christ was born on Christmas Day. Wreath the holly, twine the bay. Christus natus hodie, the babe, the Son, the Holy One of Mary.
Welcome to the 9th day of CraftLit, our 12-day Christmas story extravaganza. Today, in our 9th day, I am bringing you Ye Olde Christmas Stories. That's actually what I put down in my notes, was this is the Ye Olde Day. We have Christmas greetings from Lewis Carroll, from the son of Coleridge, the famous Coleridge who went walking all the time with Wordsworth and wrote Kubla Khan and things like that. He was one of the people we talked about a lot right before we did Frankenstein because he's a romantic. Then we have some people that you've probably never heard of, mixed in with our other authors and Sir Walter Scott. And all of these pieces bring you a slightly different take on what the Christmas holiday was in the author's childhood time, for the most part. The last one that I'm playing for you is my most interesting find. And for anyone who has listened to Hamilton or been able to see Hamilton, you will recognize the time and place in which the story is set. And it is set because it is written by a woman who wasn't there, but who spent most of her adult life focusing on historical research of the American colonial and especially the Revolutionary War period. So it is an interesting take on A Christmas Tale. And if you're unfamiliar with this, the famous Washington crossing the Delaware painting, where the men are rowing across the river and the river's full of ice chunks and it looks very cold. That took place about 5 miles south of where I'm sitting right now. And that means that everywhere else that is discussed in this story is not very far away from here. And I can tell you it gets cold in winter, even now. So, yikes. I have put links out to several little things that get mentioned. It's nothing that's going to get in the way of you enjoying or understanding the stories, just some things that I thought you might want to know more about. And there is one slightly odd thing. In the 1776 text, the reader pronounces Hessian as Hessian. So Hessian soldiers were Germanic soldiers who were hired. They were kind of mercenaries, but it also meant that they were really only devoted to getting paid, and they were hired by the British to fight the colonists. So we've talked about them before. I think we talked about them when we did The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, because the Headless Horseman is reputed to be a former Hessian soldier. They had the coolest uniforms. So if you go look around online, you'll see, I'm not joking, they really did have the coolest uniforms. I think Alexander Hamilton would have been jealous. I'm just saying. All right, let's get started with our stories from other eras and other places, but all at Christmas time. Here we go.
Slowly fall the snowflakes, hang the holly high, bright its berries greeting.
Christmas Greetings by Lewis Carroll. From a fairy to a child. Lady dear, if fairies may for a moment lay aside cunning tricks and elfish play, 'tis at happy Christmas tide. We have heard the children say, gentle children whom we love, long ago on Christmas Day came a message from above. Still, as Christmas tide comes round, they remember it again. Echoes still the joyful sound, peace on earth, goodwill to men. Yet the hearts must childlike be, where such heavenly guests abide, unto children in their glee, all the year is Christmas tide. Thus forgetting tricks and play, for a moment, lady dear, we would wish you, if we may, Merry Christmas, glad New Year. Christmas, 1867.
Christmas Day by Hartley Coleridge. Was it a fancy, bred of vagrant guess, or well-remembered fact, that he was born when half the world was wintry and forlorn, in nature's utmost season of distress? And did the simple earth indeed confess its destitution and its craving need, wearing the white and penitential weed, meet symbol of judicial barrenness? So be it, for in truth 'tis ever so, that when the winter of the soul is bare, the seed of heaven at first begins to grow, peeping abroad in desert of despair. Full many a floweret, good and sweet and fair, is kindly wrapped in coverlet of snow.
A Christmas Barring Out by Stella C. Shutter. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. Bobby and Alice and Pink had hung their stockings by the living-room mantel, and though it was very, very early, they decided to go to bed. They always wanted to go to bed early on Christmas Eve. Morning seemed to come so much more quickly when they went to bed early. They wouldn't even wait for a story. They would just say good night to Grandma and go right to bed. "Why," exclaimed Grandma in surprise when they had explained their intentions to her, "you mustn't go to bed so soon. You'd be awake in the morning before daylight. Come in and visit with me a while, and I'll see if I can't think up a story to tell you the same as on other nights." So they went in and sat down on their stools in front of the fire. Grandma put on her spectacles, but instead of her knitting she took up her Bible. The children were very still while she read the story of the first Christmas, how in a stable in Bethlehem the baby Christ was born, and how an angel appeared to the shepherds who were watching their flocks and told them about the Saviour's birth, and then a host of angels came and praised God, saying, "Glory to God on high, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men," just as we sing today on Christmas. "I think," said Grandma, "that I will tell you tonight about a Christmas treat at our school. When I was a little girl we had a custom handed down from pioneer times called barring out. A few days before Christmas the teacher would arrive to find the schoolhouse door securely fastened. Before he was admitted, he would have to sign a paper promising to treat his pupils. In those days we didn't have much store candy, and we looked forward for weeks to the Christmas treat we got at school. You wouldn't think much of it today. 6 sticks of red and white striped candy apiece, wintergreen and sassafras and clove, and maybe one of horehound. My, but it tasted good to us. We didn't eat it all up at once either. No, indeed. But one year we didn't know whether to look for a treat or not. The teacher, a Mr. Hazen, was from Clayville, and he had been heard to say that he did not believe in barring out or in being forced to treat his pupils. Nevertheless, we all came early to school one morning and locked him out. While we all cried, "Treat! Treat!" at the tops of our voices, William Orbison opened the window a tiny bit and thrust out the paper they had prepared for the teacher to sign, but he refused to touch it. This was not alarming, as most all of the teachers stayed out for an hour or two just for fun. We played games and had a good time. But by time for morning intermission the older pupils had begun to get anxious. Could it be possible that the teacher really did not mean to treat? At noon he was still out, walking up and down the playground, clapping his hands together, stamping his feet, and rubbing his ears to keep warm. We were anxious in earnest now. The woodbox was empty, and the fire was getting low. There was no water in the water bucket, and some of the younger children were coaxing for drinks. No teacher in our recollection had ever refused to treat. There was an old rule that if the teacher persisted in refusing to treat, he was to be ducked in the nearest stream of water. We had heard of instances when this had been done, but no one wanted to try it. The older pupils stood around in frightened little groups, and some of the smaller children were crying openly, when the teacher knocked loudly on the door and asked that the paper be handed out to him. But the paper had disappeared. We searched all over the room, but it was nowhere to be found. Again the teacher knocked and asked rather impatiently for the paper. Then William Orbison sat down at his desk and hurriedly prepared another paper and handed it out the window to the teacher. He looked at it in a puzzled way for a little bit, smiled a queer smile, and without a word signed the paper and handed it back to William. Then he was admitted and took up books, but all afternoon he kept smiling to himself as if he knew a joke on someone. We felt uneasy, though we didn't know why. After school that evening my brother Truman asked William Orbison to let him see the paper the teacher had signed. When he read it he gave a long whistle of astonishment. And what do you think William had done? In the fuss and excitement of writing out the second paper he had omitted the word treat. The teacher had promised nothing. That explained his smiles. We were a disappointed lot of children, I can tell you. We shouldn't have any Christmas treat, for after the way the teacher had talked about treating, no one thought he would treat if he could help it, and here was a way out for him. The next day we were perfectly sure he did not intend to treat, for when William Orbison left out a word in his reading lesson, the teacher said, "Watch yourself, William. Leaving out words is getting to be quite a habit with you." Other years we could hardly wait till the day before Christmas. We wore our best clothes, and right after dinner we would speak pieces, have spelling and ciphering matches, sing songs, have our treat, and play games the rest of the afternoon. Lots of the older brothers and sisters would come to visit, and they would play with us, and the teacher would play too, and we would have lots of fun. But this year I should rather have stayed at home and watched the Christmas preparations at our house, for there wouldn't be much fun at school without any treat. It was a cold, windy morning, and Father took us to school in the sled. We had lessons in the morning as usual, and in the afternoon recitations and songs and a little play that the teacher had helped us get up. Truman gave Hamlet's soliloquy and did it very well too, and Charlie had a piece, but he forgot all but the first verse. We were so interested that we didn't think about the treat, and you can imagine how surprised we were when the teacher, instead of dismissing us, said that we would now have an unexpected but very welcome visitor. The door opened, and in came old Santa Claus with a white beard and a red coat, and on his back the biggest bag. You should have seen our eyes pop. Of course it wasn't the really, truly Santa Claus who comes in the night and fills the stockings. Oh no, this was just a pretend Santa. He put his bag down on the teacher's platform, and after he had made a little speech, he opened it up. And what do you suppose was in that bag? Candy. Cream candy and chocolate drops and clear candy, red and yellow, shaped like animals and horns and baskets, such candy as we had never seen before, a sack for each pupil. As we went up one by one, the smallest first, to get our treat, Santa asked each one of us to recite something for him. The smaller children knew verses out of their readers, and some of us recited the pieces we had said earlier in the afternoon. But how we all laughed when Longford Henlon, who was the tallest boy in school, couldn't think of anything to say but, "I had a little dog, his name was Jack, put him in the barn, he jumped through a crack." And now to bed, and go right to sleep. I've heard that if Santa Claus comes and finds children awake, he goes away and comes back later. That is, he means to come back later, but he has been known to get so busy he forgot to come back at all. So say your prayers and go to sleep.
Mary's son is born.
Christmas in the Olden Time by Sir Walter Scott. The damsel donned her kirtle sheen, the hall was dressed with holly green. Forth to the wood did merry men go, to gather in the mistletoe. Then opened wide the baron's hall, to vassal, tenant, serf and all. Power laid his rod of rule aside, and ceremony doffed his pride. The heir, with roses in his shoes, that night might village partner choose. The lord, undrogating share the vulgar game of post and pair. All hailed with uncontrolled delight and general voice the happy night, that to the cottage as the crown brought tidings of salvation down. The fire with well-dried logs supplied went roaring up the chimney wide. The huge hall table's oaken face, scrubbed till it shone the day to grace, bore then upon its massive board no mark to part the squire and lord. Then was brought in the lusty brawn by an old blue-coated serving man. Then the grim boar's head frowned on high, crested with bay and rosemary. Well, can the green-garbed ranger tell how, when and where the monster fell? What dogs before his death he tore, and all the baiting of the boar? The wassail round in good brown bowls, garnished with ribbon, blithely trolls. There the huge sirloin reeked, hard by plum porridge stood, and Christmas pie. Nor failed old Scotland to produce, at such high tide, her savoury goose. Then came the merry maskers in, and carols roared with blithesome din. If unmelodious was the song, it was a hearty note and strong. Who lists may in their mumming see traces of ancient mystery, while shirts supplied the masquerade, and smutted cheeks the visors made. But oh, what maskers richly dight can boast of bosoms half so light? England was merry England when old Christmas brought his sports again. 'Twas Christmas broached the mightiest ale, 'twas Christmas told the merriest tale. A Christmas gambol oft would cheer the poor man's heart through half the year.
Christmas Time by John Clare. Glad Christmas comes, and every hearth makes room to give him welcome now. E'en want will dry its tears in mirth, and crown him with a holly bough. Though tramping 'neath a winter sky o'er snowy paths and rimy stiles, the housewife sets her spinning by to bid him welcome with her smiles. Each house is swept the day before, and windows stuck with evergreens. The snow is besomed from the door, and comfort crowns the cottage scenes. Gilt holly with its thorny pricks, and yew and box with berries small, these deck the unused candlesticks and pictures hanging by the wall. Neighbours resume their annual cheer, wishing with smiles and spirits high, glad Christmas and a happy year to every morning passer-by. Milkmaids their Christmas journeys go, accompanied by a favoured swain, and children pace the crumpling snow to taste their granny's cake again. The shepherd, now no more afraid, since custom doth the chance bestow, starts up to kiss the giggling maid beneath the branch of mistletoe that 'neath each cottage beam is seen, with pearl-like berries shining gay, the shadow still of what hath been, which fashion yearly fades away. The singing waits, a merry throng, at early morn with simple skill, yet imitate the angel's song, and chaunt their Christmas ditty still. And mid the storm that dies and swells by fits, in hummings softly steals the music of the village bells, ringing around their merry peals. When this is past, a merry crew, bedecked in masks and ribbons gay, the morris dance their sports renew, and act their winter evening play. The clown turned king, for penny praise, storms with the actors' strut and swell, and Harlequin, a laugh to raise, wears his hunchback and tinkling bell. And oft for pence and spicy ale, with winter nosegays pinned before, the wassail singer tells her tale, and drawls her Christmas carols o'er, while prentice boy with ruddy face and rime-bepowdered dancing locks, from door to door with happy face, runs round to claim his Christmas box. The block upon the fire is put, to sanction custom's old desires, and many a faggot's bands are cut, for the old farmer's Christmas fires, where loud-tongued gladness joins the throng, and winter meets the warmth of May, till, feeling soon the heat too strong, he rubs his shins and draws away. While snows the window panes bedim, the fire curls up a sunny charm, where, creaming o'er the pitcher's rim, the flowering ale is set to warm. Mirth, full of joy as summer bees, sits there its pleasures to impart, and children, 'tween their parents' knees, sing scraps of carols off by heart, and some, to view the winter weathers, climb up the window-seat with glee, likening the snow to falling feathers in fancy's infant ecstasy, laughing with superstitious love o'er visions wild that youth supplies, of people pulling geese above, and keeping Christmas in the skies. As though the homestead trees were dressed, in lieu of snow, with dancing leaves, as though the sun-dried martin's nest, instead of icicles, hung the eaves, the children hail the happy day, as if the snow were April's grass, and pleased, as 'neath the warmth of May, sport o'er the water froze to glass. Thou day of happy sound and mirth, that long with childish memory stays, how blest around the cottage hearth I met thee in my younger days, harping with rapture's dreaming joys on presents which thy coming found, the welcome sight of little toys, the Christmas gift of cousins round. About the glowing hearth at night, the harmless laugh and winter tale go round, while parting friends delight to toast each other o'er their ale. The cotter oft with quiet zeal will musing o'er his Bible lean, while in the dark the lovers steal to kiss and toy behind the screen. Old customs, oh, I love the sound, however simple they may be. Whate'er with time hath sanction found is welcome and is dear to me. Pride grows above simplicity, and spurns them from her haughty mind, and soon the poet's song will be the only refuge they can find.
Slowly fall the snow. its berries greeting.
Old Christmas by Mary Howitt. Now he who knows Old Christmas, he knows a wight of worth, for he's as good a fellow as any on the earth. He comes warm cloaked and coated, and buttoned to the chin, and ere he is anigh the door, we ope to let him in. He comes with voice most cordial, it does one good to hear, for all the little children he asks each passing year. His heart is warm and gladsome, not like your griping elves, who, with their wealth in plenty, think only of themselves. He tells us witty stories, he sings with might and main. We ne'er forget his visit till he comes back again. With laurel green and holly we make the house look gay. We know that it will please him, it was his ancient way. Oh, he's a rare old fellow, what gifts he gives away! There's not a lord in England could equal him today. Good luck unto old Christmas, long life now let us sing. He is more kind unto the poor than any crowned king.
Christmas in 1776 by Anne Hollingsworth Wharton. On Christmas Day in '76, our gallant troops with bayonets fixed to Trenton marched away. Children, have any of you ever thought of what little people like you were doing in this country more than 100 years ago, when the cruel tide of war swept over its bosom? From many homes the fathers were absent, fighting bravely for the liberty which we now enjoy, while the mothers no less valiantly struggled against hardships and discomforts in order to keep a home for their children, whom you only know as your great-grandfathers and great-grandmothers, dignified gentlemen and beautiful ladies, whose painted portraits hang upon the walls in some of your homes. Merry, romping children they were in those far-off times, yet their bright faces must have looked grave sometimes when they heard the grown people talk of the great things that were happening around them. Some of these little people never forgot the wonderful events of which they heard, and afterward related them to their children and grandchildren, which accounts for some of the interesting stories which you may still hear, if you are good children. The Christmas story that I have to tell you is about a boy and a girl who lived in Bordentown, New Jersey. The father of these children was a soldier in General Washington's army, which was encamped a few miles north of Trenton, on the Pennsylvania side of the Delaware River. Bordentown, as you can see by looking on your map, if you have not hidden them all away for the holidays, is about 7 miles south of Trenton, where 1,500 Hessians and a troop of British light horse were holding the town. Thus you see that the British, in force, were between Washington's army and Bordentown, besides which there were some British and Hessian troops in the very town. All this seriously interfered with Captain Tracy's going home to eat his Christmas dinner with his wife and children. Kitty and Harry Tracy, who had not lived long enough to see many wars, could not imagine such a thing as Christmas without their father, and had busied themselves for weeks in making everything ready to have a merry time with him. Kitty, who loved to play quite as much as any frolicsome Kitty of to-day, had spent all her spare time in knitting a pair of thick woolen stockings, which seems a wonderful feat for a little girl only 8 years old to perform. Can you not see her sitting by the great chimney place, filled with its roaring, crackling logs, in her quaint, short-waisted dress, knitting away steadily, and puckering up her rosy, dimpled face over the strange twists and turns of that old stocking? I can see her, and I can also hear her sweet voice as she chatters away to her mother about how surprised Papa will be to find that his little girl can knit like a grown-up woman, while Harry spreads out on the hearth a goodly store of shell barks that he has gathered and is keeping for his share of the surprise. "What if he shouldn't come?" asked Harry suddenly. "Oh, he'll come. Papa never stays away on Christmas," said Kitty, looking up into her mother's face for an echo to her words. Instead, she sees something very like tears in her mother's eyes. "Oh, mamma, don't you think he'll come?" "He will come if he possibly can," said Mrs. Tracy, "and if he cannot, we will keep Christmas whenever dear Papa does come home." "It won't be half so nice," said Kitty. "Nothing so nice as really Christmas, and how's Kriss Kringle going to know about it if we change the day?" "We'll let him come just the same, and if he brings anything for papa, we can put it away for him." This plan still seemed a poor one to Miss Kitty, who went to her bed in a sober mood that night, and was heard telling her dear dolly, Martha Washington, that wars were miserable, and that when she married she should have a man who kept a candy shop for a husband, and not a soldier. "No, Martha, not even if he's as nice as papa." As Martha made no objection to this little arrangement, being an obedient child, they were both soon fast asleep. The days of that cold winter of 1776 wore on. So cold it was that the suffering of the soldiers were great, their bleeding feet often leaving marks on the pure white snow over which they marched. As Christmas drew near, there was a feeling among the patriots that some blow was about to be struck, but what it was and from whence they knew not. And better than all, the British had no idea that any strong blow could come from Washington's army, weak and out of heart, as they thought, after being chased through Jersey for Cornwallis. Mrs. Tracy looked anxiously each day for news of the husband and father only a few miles away, yet so separated by the river and the enemy's troops that they seemed like 100. Christmas Eve came, but brought with it few rejoicings. The hearts of the people were too sad to be taken up with merrymaking, although the Hessian soldier in the town, good-natured Germans, who only fought the Americans because they were paid for it, gave themselves up to the feasting and revelry. "Shall we hang up our stockings?" asked Kitty in rather a doleful voice. "Yes," said her mother. "Santa Claus won't forget you, I'm sure, although he has been kept pretty busy looking after the soldiers this winter." "Which side is he on?" asked Harry. "The right side, of course," said Mrs. Tracy, which was the most sensible answer she could possibly have given. So the stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. Two little rosy faces lay fast asleep upon the pillow when the good old soul came dashing over the roof about 1 o'clock, and after filling each stocking with red apples and leaving a cornucopia of sugar plums for each child, he turned for a moment to look at the sleeping faces, for St. Nicholas has a tender spot in his great big heart for a soldier's children. Then, remembering many other small folks waiting for him all over the land, he sprang up the chimney and was away in a trice. Santa Claus, in the form of Mrs. Tracy's farmer brother, brought her a splendid turkey. But because the Hessians were uncommonly fond of turkey, it came hidden under a load of wood. Harry was very fond of turkey too, as well as of all other good things. But when his mother said, "It's such a fine bird, it seems too bad to eat it without father," Harry cried out, "Yes, keep it for papa." And Kitty joining in the chorus, the vote was unanimous, and the turkey was hung away to await the return of the good soldier, although it seemed strange, as Kitty told Martha Washington, to have no papa and no turkey on Christmas Day. The day passed and night came, cold with a steady fall of rain and sleet. Kitty prayed that her dear papa might not be out in the storm, and that he might come home and wear his beautiful blue stockings, and eat his turkey, said Harry's sleepy voice, after which they were soon in the land of dreams. Toward morning the good people in Bordentown were suddenly aroused by firing in the distance, which became more and more distinct as the day wore on. There was great excitement in the town. Men and women gathered together in little groups in the streets to wonder what it was all about, and neighbours came dropping into Mrs. Tracy's parlour all day long, one after the other, to say what they thought of the firing. In the evening there came a body of Hessians flying into the town to say that General Washington had surprised the British at Trenton early that morning and completely routed them, which so frightened the Hessians in Bordentown that they left without the slightest ceremony. It was a joyful hour to the good town people when the red jackets turned their backs on them, thinking every moment that the patriot army would be after them. Indeed, it seemed as if wonders would never cease that day, for while rejoicings were still loud over the departure of the enemy, there came a knock at Mrs. Tracy's door, and while she was wondering whether she dared open it, it was pushed ajar, and a tall soldier entered. What a scream of delight greeted that soldier, and how Kitty and Harry danced about him and clung to his knees, while Mrs. Tracy drew him toward the warm blaze and helped him off with his damp cloak. Cold and tired Captain Tracy was, after a night's march in the streets and a day's fighting, but he was not too weary to smile at the dear faces around him, or to pat Kitty's head when she brought his warm stockings and would put them on the tired feet herself. Suddenly there was a sharp, quick bark outside the door. "What's that?" cried Harry. "Oh, I forgot. Open the door. Here, Fido, Fido." Into the room there sprang a beautiful little King Charles spaniel, white with tan spots and ears of the longest, softest, and silkiest. "What a little dear!" exclaimed Kitty. "Where did it come from?" "From the Battle of Trenton," said her father. "His poor master was shot. After the redcoats had turned their backs and I was hurrying along one of the streets where the fight had been the fiercest, I heard a low groan, and turning saw a British soldier lying among a number of slain. I raised his head. He begged for some water, which I brought him, and bending down my ear I heard him whisper, 'Dying, last battle, say a prayer.' He tried to follow me in the words of a prayer, and then taking my hand laid it on something soft and warm, nestling close up his breast. It was this little dog. The gentleman, for he was a real gentleman, gasped out, 'Take care of my poor Fido. Good night,' and was gone. It was as much as I could do to get the little creature away from his dead master. He clung to him as if he loved him better than life. You'll take care of him, won't you, children? I brought him home for you, for a Christmas present." "Pretty little Fido," said Kitty, taking the soft, curly creature in her arms. "I think it's the best present in the world, and tomorrow is to be real Christmas, because you are home, Papa." "And we'll eat the turkey," said Harry, "and shellbarks, lots of them, that I saved for you. What a good time we'll have! And oh, Papa, don't go to war any more, but stay at home with Mother and Kitty and Fido and me. What would become of our country if we should all do that, my little man?" It was a good day's work that we did this Christmas, getting the army all across the river so quickly and quietly that we surprised the enemy and gained a victory with the loss of few men. Thus it was that some of the good people of 1776 spent their Christmas, that their children and grandchildren might spend many of them as citizens of a free nation.
Where rocks and nests are fleeting.
If you like what you hear, please leave us a review on iTunes, like us on Facebook. You can download our app for iOS devices, Android devices, Windows phones. You can listen to CraftLit on Stitcher Radio, iHeartRadio, Google Play Music. And remember, if your hands are too busy to pick up a book, at least you can turn one on.